Good afternoon, model makers, and welcome back to the channel. I am Chris, and this is Model Airplane Maker. Today we are continuing the Tomcat build series with part 2. The F-14 build speeds up considerably at this point with the assembly of the fuselage, and I've got some tips to make painting and detailing the exhausts easier so you can take them to the... Nope, not gonna do it. Starting at step 9, Tamiya has a very clever way to solve the swing wing issues on the F-14. I've built other Tomcat models, and a common problem with them is that the wings become unsynced, or there's a chance they become unsynced if they're played with after the build. And I know you guys will swing the wings, just like you spin the props and run around the house making engine noises. Anyway, Tamiya solves this by bolting the parts in and reinforcing them with yet more bolts. It has a certain brutal elegance. So, feel confident throwing this airplane into afterburner while running up the stairs. Hey, you do you. It's all good. I'm not here to judge. There are various options for weapons configuration, and each will need to have holes drilled in the fuselage. The instructions call for some engraved detail to be filled in. I chose to use Tamiya putty, and to minimize the cleanup, I taped the outline of that panel with some Tamiya tape. This stuff dries relatively hard, and within a couple hours it's easy to sand. Some modelers I know use Bondo for this kind of work, and that stuff works just as well. Others use liquid putty for these jobs because it would make the task cleaner, but I find that stuff to be hit or miss on panel lines because it shrinks a lot as it dries. As you can see, this is a relatively easy cleanup when the tape is removed. I'm wet sanding with 400 grit paper, and that'll make quick work of the putty and leave you with a nicely filled in panel line exactly where you want them. There is an increased pace to the build at this point, so be sure to really study the instructions. At the rear of the fuselage, there's some thin triangular panels that need to be removed. I'm pointing them out here. They need to be removed or the engines won't fit. They'll come off easily with a file or sanding stick. Just be sure to use the scribe panel line to guide your work. Another place to pay close attention is these elevator attachment points. Make your life easier by remembering to insert the little rubber gasket into the holder before gluing it into place. I have to say that I am extremely impressed with the precision of this kit, including the inlets. Just wait till you see them slip onto the fuselage. Everything just absolutely fits on this model. And now on to the engines. I first painted the engine fans with gloss white along with the gear bay areas, and I taped off the white nose cone of the engine front, and I'm spraying it with Tamiya flat aluminum to complete this part. The engine exhausts are made up of a few parts, including these slide molded cylinders with excellent rib detail on the inside. And while I appreciate Tamiya making this part of the build easier with fewer parts, painting inside a closed cylinder is very difficult. I found a great solution for this problem from David Aungst over at Hyperscale. He suggests measuring 1 inch from the end of the exhaust and cutting off the bottom of the cylinder at this line. This makes painting the parts much easier. And since the engine would be dark and sooty down at the bottom anyway, you won't be able to tell that cut line when they are reassembled. And I'm painting it now with flat black. Now to blend the burner can with the bottom part here, all you need to do is spray some flat black just at the bottom edge, which is what I'm demonstrating. And that way, when you glue the burner can to the bottom of that cylinder back together, you're going to have a seamless join that you won't be able to see. Also, the Tomcat had some afterburner markings that sort of went up the burner can, so I could very carefully just shot a couple of streams of black upwards in the burner can to mimic this. So as you can see, you get that staining that's up that burner can, up the ribs like that. Next up are the gear bays, and I am just using the MIG ammo Panaline wash. I'm using the black. Normally I don't go so stark when I use Panaline washes, but for whatever reason, it really works well with these white gear bays on the Tomcat. And like I've demonstrated a number of times when using this product, it is incredibly easy to use. So it goes on just with your standard brush. I use it's thin, so it goes on with capillary reaction. And after about half an hour or so, 40 minutes, I just use a Q-tip to clean up all of the parts where I don't want the wash to be. I also use the same wash on the exhausts of the Tomcat. So here I've just spray painted it with, I've airbrushed it with the various mixes that Tamiya calls for in the instructions. And I'm just doing a pin wash of this MIG ammo wash into all the recessed areas of the burner cans. And again, just like I've done before, wait 40 minutes or so to wipe off the excess. And this will really make all of the detail pop on these exhausts. Tamiya calls for multiple shades of metallic paint back there, and they're fairly easy to replicate. The only ones that I had a little difficulty with were at the very tips of this piece here, and I had to use a brush to paint them on as opposed to spraying them on. And here as well, just grabbing a little bit of wash, using it to accentuate the recessed areas, and letting it dry 40 minutes for a very quick cleanup with the cotton bud. Okay, Q-tip, cotton bud, it's up to you. Use whatever you want. I've even used paper towel and even an old t-shirt. Everything works well. And this is, again, without using any thinners or any liquids to get the dried bits off. For whatever reason, this MIG ammo wash has just enough give in it to be able to be wiped off of both flat and gloss surfaces, although it's much easier to wipe off of a gloss surface. The only thing to note is that you will be using a lot of Q-tips in this process. So have I told you how easy this model goes together? The next step, all I'm doing is getting the gear bays ready. It's multiple pieces to box in the gear bays, but don't worry, they fit together like a glove. They fit into the fuselage perfectly. It's all glued in. There's really no issues to worry about. In the previous episode, I did paint them gloss white, and I washed them again with the MIG Panaline wash. So once these are together, you then glue the fuselage together, and with other models when I do this, it's always a little bit of fingers crossed that the two sides mate perfectly and there aren't too many gaps or steps or issues that I have to sand down and worry about later. On this build, it went together absolutely perfectly. Just put the glue, press the pieces together, and no worries about having to do further work to get these parts seamless. The back of the model, same thing, and just again, once if you forgot to sand down this area for the engines, don't worry, you can still do it if you get to this point and you forgot to do it, but it's a lot easier to do it earlier on. This part I'm gluing the engine faces to the intakes, and then they just literally snap into the air intakes. I glued them, but I tell you, I probably didn't even need to do that. They just work absolutely perfectly in there. And while you're waiting for that glue to dry, there's really no point in slowing down. You can simply insert the intakes onto the fuselage. I actually had a little bit of trouble figuring out where I would put the glue exactly. The fit is just such that there's just no gap. So I lifted it up a little to fit the brush of the glue inside before I pressed everything down. And as you'll see, once you press everything down, all the gaps just disappear. It's again, it's such a great fitting kit. And once that snaps in place, there's just these little spacers that must be put in after the intakes. And once again, I put a little bit of glue on, fitted in, and you just get almost a panel line width between these parts and the rest of the fuselage. In fact, the only part that I had a little bit of difficulty to fit was this one here underneath the forward section of fuselage, and it was mainly in the back. Just a ever so slight gap that I was able to remedy with a small clamp. And right near the nose gear, there is a teeny tiny gap there too that I can probably fill in with just a small bit of vinyl putty, which I'll do at a later part of the build. But other than that, this kit has fit together extremely well. So the last part of the build at this point is to assemble the aft part of the engines. And it's a simple process of pushing in the, I guess that's the burner can. I don't really know what that's called. If someone in the comments knows, please tell me. Simple to glue that in there. And then the burner can all fits together. So you'll benefit if you made the cut by putting a line in there like I've done. And that way you can align everything so that you'll have as seamless as a joint as you can. And then simple matter of getting some glue and gluing this cylinder back together. After that, the rest of the build in terms of the after the engine is fairly straightforward. It's basically parts that fit one inside the other. So there's the cylinder, which fits inside of the larger part of the exhaust, and there's just enough room for a ledge to fit the exhaust, or the final exhaust nozzle on there. Liquid glue is actually a good idea at this point because it fills that surface all the way around the circle where the shelf is for this last bit. And as you can see, they just slide right in the back of the Tomcat. And Tamiya has you glue them in at this point, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep these parts separate, so when I glue the rest of the, when I paint the rest of the airplane, I can keep these separate, not have to mask them. So at the end of step 19 in the Tamiya instructions, we have a completed fuselage and we have completed and painted exhausts. I hope you liked this video. If you did and you want to see more, or if you think others might benefit from seeing them, please like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time with video 3, where we'll feature the landing gear and the gear doors. Until then, bye for now.